Hey, what's going on, everyone? I wanted to talk about the current state of the world. What sort of world am I looking at, right? What sort of world are we going to be forced into? It has to do with a world that has a lot of different technologies that we weren't used to or didn't think was going to be coming our way, right? At least not as fast as we thought. And so this has to do with a show called A Ghost in the Shell, a show created by, I believe, Momoru Oshii, and I think he actually had an idea of the future. He basically painted a world where there's a lot of robotic enhancements, a lot of human form to machine transfers, where there are non-biological human beings, meaning mechanical brains and whatnot. People have figured out a way to transfer consciousness. Different crime groups and organized crime groups are high. Crony capitalism is very high, where there's corporate corruption that have power more stronger than certain governing bodies. It is a world where we see anarchism high and much more order down, right? And if anyone has played the game or seen the game Cyberpunk 2077, divide is extreme and overall sense of anarchism is rampant. And it's difficult to try and tamp down that anarchism because the ability to do so is at a challenge, because these technology available for governments will become available for future crime groups and terrorist groups, right? An example of this is social media and information, right? How beforehand you would have internal governing bodies with access to more central information. Fast forward to today, we have something like Twitter where everybody has access to quick central information. In this world, we have governments, government agencies at odds with crony corporations and different terror groups and whatnot. It also goes into a world where their sense of identity, because they went from human to machine, or a true transfer of consciousness from a biological brain cavity to a mechanical one, it dives into a world where people question their identity. People get to choose their identity. And so that is typically the thematics around that show, regarding, at what point is a machine a human being, or at what point does life begin and end, and things of that sort. And when you look at the world around us today, this is what I'm concerned with, is that I think overall in general, we look to be trending towards a ghost in the shell future. An example of this would be, if you look at the mass shootings around the US, you see people that never met with each other, that never spoke with each other, but online were able to connect with each other through their, mission or ideology, or however you would like to describe it. But it's basically people that were never tethered with each other that are able to perform the same acts or same vision of each other. And I believe in the show it is called a standalone complex. What we've seen throughout the United States is that we have seen this sort of behavior where these sorts of, for example, mass shootings have happened throughout the country. But not only that, it has begun to spread throughout the world. So we have seen these sort of mass stabbings or mass coalition, mass movements. And I don't think this is by coincidence. Ever since the internet came, things have changed. Human social and behavioral changes are something that we didn't really understand, but we will begin to see more and more, right? This includes, let's say extremist ideologies that carry out violent events, right? We're seeing these sorts of no tether organization, right? Or maybe better put, no planned actionable events, but people individually are taking it upon themselves to make it happen, right? Another theme, what concerns me is, for example, the gender or non-gender or the Zimzer pronouns. Aside from your political ideologies, in the thematics of the show, it deals with the fact that there is a human being, let's say, that goes into a mechanical body that can choose male or female, but then maybe not even choose either. And so what sort of a mechanical being is it and whatnot, right? This is what we have been seeing. I think there's a lot of assumption that it is just mental illness and people are confused, which it appears that there's a high degree of it. But I think it's not a coincidence why the self-identification and question of it is happening at a time where identities from the physical world we're at odds, but then now when we get into the digital world, it becomes a little bit more nuanced, or maybe some people would use the word freer, right? And so an example of this would be, for example, a virtual reality game called VR Chat. In this VR Chat world, there are people that will go into these virtual rooms not as themselves, but as something else entirely. And when I say something else entirely, I'm not talking about another identity that was created based on career choice or location or historical background. I'm talking about a change in whether they call it gender or pronoun. You can see this online, and there have been some documentaries about people that are finding more life, more meaning, deciding in the end that that virtual world is their world, and the real one, it is their second world. Another example right now when it comes to geopolitics is we are seeing a world where we can see government bodies that are struggling right now to keep order, right? We are seeing that people are, government bodies are having a struggle in trying to maintain order. We're basically seeing governments not being able to operate like they did before. In an age where people are connecting on social media and there is a wider vision, the governments have to tread much more carefully, right? If not try and manipulate certain areas so that they can go through their actions covered. For example, having a media arm. But that media arm is now different today, right? Because every citizen now has a media arm. And what we're seeing is that the government bodies are not able to, function outrightly as they did before. They would have to bob and weave and be much more sophisticated on this front. In doing so, what has happened is that there has been outsourcing of, for example, being able to accomplish the actions that the certain government body wanted to accomplish. The United States, they had a company called Blackwater. The Russians also began to develop their own company, and they have now the Wagner Group, right? These different military arms, private military arms, contractors, other paramilitary groups around the world are operating, not under the behest of the government, some, but also in conjunction with the government. And I think, unfortunately, into the future, private groups maybe might in business with certain governments, right? It might actually be more horizontal than we think. And again, that is showing that, that sort of role that used to reside with governments, it appears that it is not into the future, right? Not because it is just a regular trend, but it is the trend that is more better when it comes to efficiency, cost, having cover. And I think that this is continuously growing. With Russia and Ukraine, we are seeing this, right? We are seeing these external groups that are operating in that region, right? Again, that's another signal for me where it shows this sort of a world where it seems a little bit more spread out when it comes to war and those sorts of violence. It won't be at maybe a larger scale like a world war, right? Ghost in the Shell. Take a look and try to understand what I think might be happening right now. And it is obviously regarding technology, but in a deeper sense, evolution of maybe the human, right? Whether that's true or not, biotech and the mechanical self, maybe it's all hearsay and maybe it's all nonsense. But if it isn't, even just by a little bit, we are dealing with a world that we're not actually ready for, right? If I'm not mistaken, the biotech real estate leasing in Massachusetts has gone extremely up, right? They have been leasing laboratories by a lot. And I think that we are going to continuously see those sorts of area of technology develop more faster than we think. I think that these private groups and private companies are going to be rising, doing the function of what only the government used to do. We are seeing it with different terror groups and, let's say, cartel groups right now, where they're using social media either through recruitment process or, let's say, usage of civilian drone technology and how to implement it in a battlefield, right? And so I believe, for example, the usage of civilian drones in the Middle East were found to be used near the southern border of the United States, right, by the cartels. And what we're seeing is these knowledge transfers happen quickly, efficiently through social media, right? I think this is possible that this is not only going to go between different terror or crime groups, but also through private citizens and civilian militias, civilian criminal organizations. Because of the nature and speed of information, actionable speed maybe not be able to keep up, right? Actionable speed, the physicality requirements will be there. And in order to do that, you are going to have have cooperation, but I think we might be going into a future world where that cooperation will also be with civilian, let's say private contractors or private companies, right? Let's see how this goes and turns out, because we are seeing it right now. If you remember back to the riots, we had civilian patrols and civilian militia groups that are going to be, let's say, providing security and whatnot, right? And so this is a trend that we are seeing grow, not decrease. We are seeing it increase. So let's see how that actually turns out. And it is going to be a scary world, I think, but that's only if the good guy is not present, right? And good people are going to have to stand up more than ever before in order to try and sway the world into good. A world that is cyberpunkish, and we're seeing the wealth divide happen and all these other signs. It shows us that, you know, good people are going to have to be ready more than the bad guys, because in a way it is going to be a race, right? A race for control, for dominance. And if you have a world shaped by a lot of bad people, it's not going to be a world that anyone wants to leave behind for their loved ones. You know, I guess I'm making this message for everybody to keep an eye out and make sure you're aware. That's all I have for this video. Let me know what you guys have thought, and good luck.